If you know anything about football history, chances are that you know about the 1958 NFL Championship. That was the first overtime championship game in NFL history. Most people associated with the sport consider it to be the greatest game in the sport's history. It really was this game that established the NFL on the national stage. And that makes it a pretty fitting place to start a historic replay, right? But the thing that we tend to forget is that the NFL really was not big-time football back in 1958. Now, the focus that everybody had back then was on college football. The pro game was still seen as kind of like a basket case. For example, the 1958 edition of Street and Smith's Football Yearbook was focused almost entirely on college football. There was only a brief mention of the professional game near the back, followed by a little bit about Canadian football. Back in 1957, it was all about the Detroit Lions in the West and the Cleveland Browns in the East. And the experts predicted that it would be Detroit and Cleveland again for the title in late December. So it's kind of odd to consider this today, but the New York Giants really were not considered major competitors for the title at the start of the 1958 season. Actually, the Cleveland Browns had been so dominant throughout the 1950s and now had Jim Brown that nobody thought they could be stopped. After dominating the old All-American Football Conference, the Browns moved to the NFL and continued their streak of victories. The Browns were known for their punishing running attack and had some of the best fullbacks in the history of the league. In fact, to that point, the only year the Browns hadn't won the Eastern Division title was 1956, when it belonged to the New York Giants. And amazingly, just like I said, the Browns got better from there. So after a disappointing finish in 1956, where they finished 4th, the Browns drafted high in the first round of the 1957 NFL Draft, and they picked up an absolute gem. Jim Brown, arguably the best running back of all time, was Cleveland's first-round pick in 1957, and he was 6th in the draft, not 1st. All Brown did in his rookie year of 1957 was get 4.7 yards per carry and 942 yards over the course of the season. And so it's really no secret that the Cleveland Browns were seen as the team to beat heading into 1958. Anyway, as you probably already know, I'm going to take control of the New York Giants here in this Tecmo Super Bowl project. And we'll see how it goes. First off, though, we're going to have to take a look at the Giants roster and see what we have to offer. The big story of the Giants, of course, is Frank Gifford, one of the better halfbacks of his day. Gifford is in the Hall of Fame, of course, and there's a good reason for that. But those of you who are my age probably remember him more for his Monday Night Football broadcasting than anything else. Charlie Connerly, who's a bit less famous, was the Giants quarterback that year, and the kicker was a fellow you might have heard of, Pat Summerall. But you know, the real key to the 1958 Giants was the defense. The Giants allowed only 183 points in 12 games that season. So they say that defense wins championships, and the Giants sure had a championship defense. So now let's take a look at our opponent today, the Chicago Cardinals. The Cardinals were still in Chicago in 1958, though that wouldn't last for long. The problem the Cardinals had was that they were completely outshined by the Chicago Bears. As strange as it might seem these days, the Cardinals played football in Old Comiskey Park, usually in front of extremely small crowds. And as it turns out, the Chicago White Sox were scheduled to play at home on Sunday, September 28, 1958, and so the Cardinals' home opener was moved up to Buffalo, New York. That's right, not only did the Cardinals not play their home opener at home, but they played it all the way out in upstate New York. Well, that doesn't say a lot of good things about the popularity of this team at home. Now, the Cardinals have been bad for years, and they were projected to be even worse in 1958. They did stick around the Windy City for one more season in 1959 and split Soldier Field with the Bears that year, but then in 1960 they ended up moving to St. Louis. Anyway, in real life, the Giants won this game by a ton. We'll see if we can do the same thing in Tecmo Super Bowl. And just so you know, this game was televised around the country in real life as well. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started here. So we'll just go ahead and switch on over here to the ROM itself, and I'm going to sort of let this introduction play out a little bit here for you, and we'll sort of see what we have. This is a very, very well done ROM, very, very well designed, and you'll see this in a second. So you have Johnny Unitas, Jim Brown, and And Sam Huff, who I think is on the Giants, isn't that right? They changed the name of this to NFL Super Pro Football because there was no Super Bowl. This part, though, ends up being the same. But it's actually NFL Championship game is what you would call this. So we can go take a quick look here at the team data. And like I said, there's Charlie Connerly, there's Frank Gifford right here. Connerly probably not with the best passing statistics in the world. We'd always go to Don Heinrich, who has actually slightly worse statistics. There's Summerall, who was the kicker. The funny thing about, and also receiver, the funny thing about this is back in the days where guys would have a hard time making field goals from like 30 yards out. So it's going to be pretty interesting to go through and see how all this works. Here's your Sam Huff. A big part of the defense of the team. And so we'll get to know this team, I think, here gradually as time goes on, little by little. We can take a quick look here. I haven't looked at any of this, by the way, in advance. We'll take a quick look here at the playbook. I'm assuming that we're going to spend a lot of time calling running plays here, especially with Gifford and with Triple. Who is Triple? So this is going to be him, Mel Triplett. So we'll probably see a bit of Mel Triplett as well as Frank Gifford. You can see that these guys don't necessarily have the absolute maximum stats here, but they have some pretty good stats. So we'll see how this game goes. And so since I haven't set anything up here, we will go to select a team. And we go over here to, now how does this work? This is us right here, to man. All right, we'll take a look here at the schedule. Auto skip to week 1. So we'll let that Washington-Philadelphia game play out. There we go. And that means that we're ready to start. So here we go with the first game of this project, first game of this season. And yeah, we'll see how this ends up going. Now, I should let you know that this is absolutely the juiced version of the ROM. In fact, this is the most recent version of the ROM. And because this is the most recent version here of the ROM, like it's going to be juiced basically by default. I will note though that it only has 5 minutes per quarter instead of the 7 that we were used to a little bit before. So we'll see how this works. We'll go with Triple here. We'll call a quick running play and see how we do. Yep, there you go. This feels really nice and it feels very, very normal after doing all that with Ottawa, right? I think I'm going to end up like the rest of you guys and only play in the juiced ROMs, you know, from here on out. That's probably what's going to wind up happening. Oh, we almost got that to work, even though they called the right play and had us figured out. Should have just kept it with him. So it's going to take a little while. It'll take probably a couple games for me to get totally used to what our play calling scheme is and stuff. All of this is done, by the way, accurately, because it's not like you were calling a bunch of, you know, shotgun passes or anything like that back in 1958. So it's a really, really well-designed ROM. It's a really well-designed version of this game and designed to sort of give you that, you know, go back in time type feeling. Let's see if we can make this 3rd down and 3, huh? Oh yeah, we got this. No worries. Fumble out of bounds, no problem. So I've got to sort of change my mindset here, and it's going to take, like I said, probably a little while to get used to exactly what's going on here. That was not the best pass in the world. Of course, he was under a lot of pressure. Later on today, I'm going to have the video on sort of what my discoveries are about playing with these real juiced versions of these ROMs, because there are a couple of things that I've learned as time has gone on. Shoot, we didn't get that. All right, let's see if we can push it forward here. Frank Gifford has it, and he's got the touchdown. Oh, almost got the touchdown. So yeah, there's a couple of things that I learned after playing with the Ottawa Red Blacks about like the way to actually, you know, make it work, the way to play defense with these ROMs, the way to play offense, and as you can see, it's kind of helped a little bit here. It's a bit different than the original. That was bad. Oh, we made it anyway. It's a little bit different than the original Tecmo Super Bowl. The the thing you have to pay the most attention to, in addition to not kicking an onside kick when you don't want to, the thing that you really have to pay the most attention to on offense is sort of making sure that you don't. That was bad. I called running defense, and I got really schooled for that. So the thing you have to make sure you pay attention to on offense is kind of what the defense is doing, and that you just sort of like take whatever it is the defense gives you, as opposed to trying to like force things forward. I'm surprised they call 2 running plays like that. I guess I'm thinking too much in terms of historical accuracy. I should be thinking a little bit more in terms of Tecmo Super Bowl. So we need to start calling some passing defenses here, I think. MC Reynolds. So raise your hand if you've ever heard of MC Reynolds. 7-7. Well, we do have a ball game, so let's keep it going here and let's see what we can do. That wasn't much of a kickoff at all. Now, unlike the version that we just played with, this version isn't going to give us, all of the stats at the end of every quarter. So we're gonna have to pay some attention, and you might have to keep the stats yourself, actually. Gifford got back to the line of scrimmage, at least on that. And that was, by the way, Frank Gifford again. Yeah, he's pretty good. There's a touchdown. See, that's the difference. When you have a team like this, a team that can actually like score points, a team that has good receivers, a team with a quarterback who's not a complete, awful quarterback, and you end up doing okay. There's a lot of other things here that I haven't really quite mentioned yet. So for example, you'll notice that there's nothing on the field. This is supposed to be historically accurate, so there's no logos anywhere or anything like that. Everything is done basically to make it look like this actually is 1958, which is pretty cool. At least it's cool if you're kind of a geek for history and stuff like that. Alright, we're going to kind of camp back out here on defense and see. That's the first running play they've called all game. They go straight back to passing. Alright. Anyway, so far so good. I'm trying to remember what video I have for this channel next week to give you a little bit of a preview. I'm not sure I 100% remember actually what we're doing. I might actually end up talking a little bit about 1958 after doing a little bit of that research a little bit earlier today. It might actually be an interesting thing to talk about, and sort of like football's media climate. In fact, that might end up being the next video. As I've mentioned at some point in time in something or other that I did, the NFL was originally on the Dumont network back in the mid-50s. And so if you're wondering like why, Canadian football ended up doing a little bit better on US television, the reason why is because the NFL was on Dumont, the Canadian football, the Eastern teams were on NBC, and NBC did a lot better at broadcasting than the old Dumont network did. Based on the little bit I've read, at least so far, back in those days, NFL games were not necessarily broadcast live all the time. And Dumont had this fascination with, I have a fascination with almost getting sacked. Oh, and I changed to this receiver. That was bad. But we're going to get a touchdown out of it. Maybe not. Couldn't fight his way through. That was pretty amazing. Anyway, yeah, Dumont had some problems with the broadcasting of the NFL back in those days. And also, if you go back far enough, you'll learn that not all of the teams were part of the actual NFL contract. So, if you wanted to watch a certain team, it sort of depended upon, which television contract they were on, all this other stuff. The thing is that all this stuff that we've taken for granted because it's been this way since, like, you know, basically since before the AFL ended, all of this stuff had to be, you know, invented at some point in time. That's right, there's no touchbacks in this. I'm so used to playing with the Grey Cup version that I've forgotten about all this stuff. Alright, halftime. Something's never changed. Halftime in Tecmo Super Bowl never changes. It's always like this. That's why we love it so much. Yeah, professional football on television back in those days was not sort of like what it is now, where it's, you know, big football and, you know, everybody else is respecting, you know, the NFL on TV. Nobody wants to program anything that, you know, could possibly, that was a nice catch. No one wants to program anything that could possibly, like, have a conflict with football or anything like that. It's not that way in 1958, definitely not. Television was still kind of in its infancy, you know, and football was very, very much sort of a stoic type game. It was very much nice. It was, the NFL especially was very much sort of like a running first type game. It was very, very conservative. In fact, one of the reasons why the AFL was so popular in the early 60s is because the AFL offered an alternative. So instead of having a sport that was so much about just running and you know, like fighting to gain 3 yards at a time, the AFL had this real wide open game, and it was like nothing that the NFL had really ever seen. That was a really bad pass. So we take a pass and we give a pass. But one of the reasons why this 1958 NFL championship was so famous is because of Johnny Unitas and his drive at the end of the game, which was very, very passing focused. Good job. They've run that play far too many times. And that's also, by the way, I didn't mention it much in the opening, but that's really the game that made Johnny Unitas' career. And that's really where you start seeing people talking a lot about, you know, great passers in the NFL, as opposed to just great rushers. Yeah, not even close. Not even close. We're getting to the point here where we can pretty much run out the clock. This is not good. I don't know. You guys think I had him with too many plays? We had him receiving a lot of passes as well, so maybe. I don't know very much about King, so we're about to find out more about him, but we'll give it over here to Triple this time around. Yeah, no real need to worry. I'm sure that Frank will be all right. So by the way, oh shoot, this is not good. Ha. Bad luck. Okay, we got to stop him again. By the way, as I kind of mentioned before, there are multiple copies of this ROM. They're all, both of them rather, I should say, not all of them. Both of them are made by the same guy. And the one I'm using is the most recent of them. It took me a while to sort of like decide which one I wanted to use. I decided to go for this one. Just because it's the most recent ROM. I mean, there's no other real reason for it, other than that it looked like it was, you know, something that would be playable and would be fun and so on. This one has a somewhat unusual postseason structure. I think this is the one that has 8 teams in the postseason. So in real life in 1958, just like in all the old NFL seasons, it was only 2 teams that would make the postseason. I don't know if it's possible to even set up Tecmo Super Bowl that way. So that kind of helps to explain why it's not set up that way here. It's wide open, man. How do you leave them wide open like that? I thought this was totally juiced, right? In the juiced ROM, you're not supposed to be able to make passes like that. I don't know, maybe Chicago's or the Cardinals' defense is really bad or something? I don't know. I mean, yeah, he was just killer wide open. It feels to me like this, though this is kind of juiced, it doesn't feel as extreme as the Tecmo Grey Cup felt. That was pretty extreme. This one feels like I can actually like keep up with it. It's the first time that they've run that. They've run that, what is that, like a sweep. And boy, that didn't work very well for them at all. Let's see what King can do here. He's definitely not as fast as Gifford, but you know, we can still get some yards with him. I don't think that they're going to be looking for him. Anyway, one of the other one of the other topics I want to talk about in a future video is football on the radio, which is something that doesn't really get a whole lot of attention. But you know, even though we talk about like, you know, the baseball radio tradition and stuff like that, like the truth of the matter is that the world, especially college football, has a great and very, very long-standing radio tradition. In fact, Vin Scully's first broadcast was not a baseball game, it was a football game. He did a football broadcast from, I think it was old Braves Field for a University of Boston game. That alone might be interesting to do. I don't have any clips from that, at least no clips I know have survived from that broadcast that he did. But he did a good enough job that he got the attention of Red Barber, and the rest is history. Okay, we need to tackle this guy. There we go. I always hate it when we hear so much of that song, right? Yeah, thank you for throwing. I mean, he had nothing but green in front of him. Wow, that's the first time I've ever actually like intercepted a pass myself. So, all right, we have it on the 1 yard line. Let's see if we can avoid a safety, and we can't. Well, it was probably the wrong play call. So, in this, I guess you can call it a replayed version, the Cardinals scored 9 points as opposed to 7 in real life. Now, normally I would say, oh, this is going to be really easy, but it's not. This is the worst team in the NFL. So we have kind of an easy beginning here. This is sort of like me playing against me when I was the Ottawa Red Blacks. Where is that pass going? Not even close. Anyway, we've got this game won. There's nothing to really worry about. Yeah, at some point in time, once I've listened to a few more football radio games, I'll do a video on the history of football on the radio and stuff, and all the stuff that nobody talks about. But until then, we can celebrate our victory, aside from that embarrassing safety at the end. I really should have called a pass. Look at this. We have about, 270 yards or something like that, right? That's pretty realistic, actually, given the time. 60% completion percentage. We had those 8 runs from Triplett for 47 yards. The only problem was the injury to Gifford. So we'll go here to the schedule, and we'll go ahead and auto skip. We don't play again until week 3. So, but the thing is, if you look at these dates, you realize that there were games on Saturday as well as Sunday. We'll talk a little bit more about that in our next game tomorrow after I do a little bit of research into that. But we'll take a look at that and sort of the way that NFL games were scheduled back in the days and the things that have changed and all of that. It was a different type of sport back in the 1950s. So we'll have a lot to look at then. But for right now, we are going to celebrate our victory, and I am going to thank you once again for tuning in, and we're going to have more of this tomorrow, so stick around because it's going to be another big series, and hopefully we actually make it to the playoffs this time, and hopefully we can win playoff games. We'll see what happens. So I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Talk to you then. Bye.